Hi everyone, I'm Beta Delisi, and in this video we're going to talk about what happens at an eviction, which is a very common question that we get asked. The landlord needs to first obtain an order from the landlord and tenant board, terminating the tenancy and officially evicting the tenant. Then what happens is the landlord will have to take that order to the enforcement office of the sheriff in order to book a date and a time for an eviction. Landlords, remember, the eviction order is not a lifetime order. That means it usually have an expiration date, meaning that if you allow the tenant back in or if you don't enforce that order, you have to restart the process. Now, once the sheriff books a date and time, they will contact the landlord in order to confirm that date and time, that the sheriff and the landlord will both meet at the property, and the sheriff will supervise the lock change. What happens is also the landlord can have a locksmith attend the property, they can have their property manager attend the property, or they can make arrangements to have locks changed themselves. The sheriffs will knock on the door. If the tenant is present, they will let the tenant know that they are evicting the tenant, and then they have 15 to 20 minutes to gather and take whatever belongings they have with them to vacate the property. The landlord will then be allowed access to the property in order to secure the property, to make sure the windows are all closed and secured, to make sure the water faucets are turned off, whatever the case is, that the tenant will no longer be able to have access back to the property. And then what happens is the locks are then changed. So what happens to the tenant's belongings? Well, the tenant will then have 72 hours in order to contact the landlord for the landlord to provide access to the property. Now, access doesn't mean to give the tenant 72 hours to move back in and remove their belongings. No, what that means is a tenant will call the landlord and they'll say, hey landlord, I have a truck. I need to come in tomorrow between the hours of 12 and 7 in order to remove my belongings. The landlord should always provide access to the property in order for the tenant to remove the belongings. And the landlord should make arrangements to be there so that the tenant doesn't make any attempts to have those locks changed back. Now, once the tenant has been evicted, and if the landlord wants to pursue collections of all the arrears that they're owed, they can enforce garnishment. I hope you found this video informative. If you have any questions regarding evictions and garnishments, contact us.